As of 1903, approximately 60 independent countries exist worldwide. Europe is home to great empires that dominate much of the globe. The colonization of Africa is at its height, with 7 major European nations scrambling for control over the new territories. In Asia, the Japanese Empire is emerging as a rising hegemon following its modernization and military successes. Meanwhile, South America, where most countries have already gained independence, falls under the growing influence of the United States and grapples with numerous post-colonial challenges. In the meantime, some key events are happening over the world that will shape its future. Panama emerges as a sovereign country. A war breaks out for a long-forgotten region in South America. A military coup takes Serbia one step closer to World War I. In a series of battles, the formation of Saudi Arabia begins. At the same time, the first airplane is flown in the US, and a new football cup is established in Spain. Early on, the United States and Colombia sign a treaty that grants the US a 6-mile-wide strip of land in Panama for 100 years to build and operate a canal across the Isthmus of Panama. The US quickly ratifies the treaty, but the Colombian Congress rejects it. In Panama, then part of Colombia, the local administration sees the canal as a future source of prosperity and feels neglected by the central government. Meanwhile, Victoriano Lorenzo, the indigenous leader of the Panamanian revolutionaries who seeks independence for Panama, is seized by the central government. In May, the government executes him, to the deep frustration of the Panamanian population and politicians. In response, a separatist network forms, and representatives are sent to the US president to seek support. President Roosevelt, who considers the future Atlantic-Pacific waterway vital for the US, implies that if the separatists revolt, the US will support them. The Colombian government learns of the separatists' plans and dispatches troops to Panama. In response, the United States sends its fleet to the Panamanian coast. On November 3rd, the de facto government of Panama declares its independence from Colombia. Within 10 days, the United States recognizes the new country. A week later, a treaty is signed between Panama and the United States, establishing the Panama Canal Zone. The following year, the US will take control over it, and construction will begin. Cuba, which gained independence from the United States the previous year, signs the Treaty of Relations with the US. As part of this treaty, 2 lease agreements are signed. These provisions grant the US certain territories from Cuba, including Guantanamo Bay, for military purposes, among others, for as long as needed. South America is a land of constant territorial disputes as a post-colonial heritage. The Bolivian-Brazilian border area, known as the Acre region, is largely forgotten in the rainforest and does not have definite border lines. The border is defined by the expected source of the Yavari River, which has not yet been discovered at the time. Meanwhile, global demand for rubber skyrockets with the onset of the machinery era, and Acre, rich in rubber trees, becomes a prime area of interest. Thousands of adventurers come to the region from Bolivia, Peru, and above all, Brazil. The region is predominantly populated by Brazilians when the actual source of the river is found, allowing Bolivia to lay claim to a larger territory. A conflict arises, and the Acre region declares its independence from Bolivia as the Republic of Acre. At first, Brazil does not recognize the new republic, but then it deploys its troops, pushes back the Bolivian army, and occupies Acre. In November, a peace agreement is signed, with Bolivia ceding Acre to Brazil in exchange for commercial privileges and a small territory with waterways to the Atlantic Ocean. The Ottoman Empire possesses a coastal territory in North Africa named after its major city. Federico Minutili, an Italian colonial bibliographer, seeks to gather information about colonized lands. In 1903, his bibliography on these territories is published. Willing to supplant the colony's name, he uses an ancient Roman designation for it. That's how the territory gets its modern name, Libya. It will remain under external rule for almost 5 more decades before emerging as an independent country. In Brussels, Belgium, the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party holds its second Congress in exile. Due to serious disagreements between its leaders Vladimir Lenin and Yuliy Martov, the party splits into the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. The Bolsheviks will actively participate in the forthcoming Russian Revolution. Meanwhile, inside the Russian Empire, dissatisfaction is growing among peasants due to their living conditions. At the same time, local newspapers publish articles discrediting and blaming Jews, calling them the hated race. Rumors spread that the Tsar had secretly allowed beating Jews and plundering of Jewish households for 3 days. On April 19th, a pogrom begins, with local Jews being beaten and robbed in the streets. Nearly 50 are massacred, including at least 7 women and 3 children. The Russian government does not intervene, which further fuels public discontent and revolutionary sentiment. In just 2.5 months, workers in Baku, a city responsible for 95% of Russia's and half of the world's oil production, go on a general strike demanding better working conditions. They are soon followed by workers in Tiflis, Batumi, Poti, Feodosia, Edessa, Kyiv and other cities. The government violently suppresses the strikes. The Arabian Peninsula is mostly populated by Bedouin nomads. Historically, it had 3 major emirates: Hejaz, Jabal Shammar and Nejd. Hejaz is ruled by the Ottoman Empire, while Jabal Shammar has control over most of the Arabian heartland. Nejd was previously eliminated by the House of Rashid of Jabal Shammar, but its House of Saud is willing to regain control over the region. By 1903, they've already restored their state as the Emirate of Riyadh as a result of the Battle of Riyadh against Jabal Shammar. Starting in 1903, a series of sporadic battles takes place in the Qasim province that will become known as the Saudi-Rashidi War. The Saudi Emirate will have several victories and ultimately take control over the Arabian heartland. Eventually, the Rashid Emirate will be decimated and a new state will emerge, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that will control the Emirate of Hejaz as well. Bosnia and Herzegovina has been occupied by Austria-Hungary since the Congress of Berlin of 1878. Austria-Hungary wants to annex it despite it being technically part of the Ottoman Empire. It is opposed by the Kingdom of Serbia, which is closely related to Bosnia and Herzegovina geographically and ethnically. Serbia is ruled by the King Alexander of the Obrenović dynasty. He is unpopular in the country, since for his marriage he had to break ties with Russia and establish a closer relationship with Austria-Hungary, despite the latter having its eye on Bosnia and Herzegovina. His enemies, the Karađorđević dynasty, are supported and sponsored by Russia. After a few years of political skirmishes between King Alexander and his opponents, on June 11th, May 29th Old Style, 1903, the king's officers carry out a coup. They break into the king's bedchamber and brutally massacre him and his wife, along with several ministers and the king's chief adjutant. This puts an end to the Obrenović dynasty. A new government is formed, and the National Assembly appoints Peter Karađorđević as King of Serbia, Peter I. Internationally, the coup is widely condemned, yet it soon brings Serbia closer to Russia and France, while its relations with Austria-Hungary deteriorate. In 5 years, it will lead to a full annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina by Austria-Hungary. Located between Nepal and Bhutan, the Kingdom of Sikkim is controlled by the British. Meanwhile, Tibet is technically part of the Qing dynasty, yet in fact it's object of interest to both Russia and Britain as part of their rivalry in Asia called the Great Game. In December, British Indian Armed Forces begin their expedition to Tibet, using its borders delimitation as a pretext, and rapidly advance towards its capital, Lhasa. The main events of this confrontation will take place in 1904. On June 16th, Henry Ford, having already abandoned two unsuccessful companies, establishes Ford Motor Company. John Dodge becomes vice president, who will later start his own car manufacturing company. In the next 10 years, Ford Motor Company will revolutionize car production by introducing the moving assembly line and become one of the world's largest companies. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, William Harley and Arthur Davidson develop an internal combustion engine and connect it mechanically to a bicycle. In 1903, they complete their first motorized bicycle, or motorcycle. They continue improving the concept and found the Harley Davidson Company. In the following decades, the company will create some of the most iconic bikes of all time, including ancestors of popular styles such as bobbers and choppers. On December 17th, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, after an initial failure, the Wright brothers, who've been developing and testing gliders since 1899, successfully test their first man-piloted powered heavier-than-air machine, or airplane. It is a biplane, meaning that it has two parallel sets of wings, powered by an aluminum alloy engine, and it has a 3-axis control system. To fly it, the pilot has to lie in the central part of the plane, next to its engine. In Spain, Copa del Rey, or the Spanish Football Cup, is founded. On April 8th, the final is held in Madrid. The winner of last year's Copa de la Coronation, Madrid Football Club, competes Atlético Bilbao. Despite Madrid winning the first half, during the second half, Atlético Bilbao turns the game around, makes an epic comeback and wins the trophy. In just a couple of weeks, 3 Madrid students, inspired by Atlético Bilbao's victory, decide to found a local branch of the club. They name it Club Atlético de Madrid. The next year, it will be joined by some dissident footballers from Madrid Football Club. Athletic Madrid starts its journey in professional football. It will become one of the most titled Spanish football clubs and the strongest rival to Real Madrid and Barcelona. Relatively quiet and peaceful, like calm before the storm. That was 1903. The following year will see tensions rise and conflicts intensify.